Poswolsky.
Thank you so much for being here. This is my first time ever in Sweden. I've been here since Thursday. Very grateful to be here. I'm staying in an Airbnb in Södermalm, having a bunch of fikas, so I feel already very welcome. So thanks for having me. By a show of hands, how many of you have heard of the term quarter-life crisis? Okay, you can keep your hand raised if maybe you're going through a quarter-life crisis right now, or if you're over the age of 30 like I am and maybe it's like a third-life crisis. Or a midlife crisis. My mom is 64. She thinks she's having a quarter-life crisis. So if you had your hand raised, you are not alone. Let me repeat that. You are not alone. The truth is that 70% of Americans, and this number reflects globally as well, 70% of Americans are disengaged at their jobs. 70%. 1/5 of those people are so disengaged, they're actively undermining their coworkers' work. They're literally getting paid by their company to mess things up for that company. Now, this should be a concern to those of you in the room that are supervisors, because you're paying people to screw things up for everyone. But I think it should be a concern to all of us, because it means that millions of people are waking up every day depressed, unhappy, unfulfilled, not showing up fully for themselves, their families, their communities, or the world at large. Think about the impact those people could be having on the world if they were actually doing meaningful work, if they were actually doing work they cared about. Now, this number means a lot to me because a few years ago, I was one of those 70%. I was 28 at the time, living in Washington, D.C., which is a great city, working at the U.S. Peace Corps, which is a great organization, and on paper, everything was perfect. I was making $70,000 a year, I had health care, I had job security, I had benefits. You literally can't get fired from the US government, trust me. There are lots of people that should. I think you can take your shirt off and run around the office and you still won't get fired. And on paper, everything was perfect. I'd tell people I was the special assistant to the director of global operations at the Peace Corps and they'd be so impressed. They'd ask for my business card. My boss was impressed, my parents were impressed, people at happy hour were impressed. Except there was one small, tiny problem. I wasn't happy. How did I know I wasn't happy? Every single morning, I'd feel a shooting pain go up and down my back. I felt it when my alarm would wake me up, when I got out of bed, when I brushed my teeth, when I put on my shirt and tie, when I took the bus to work, when I scanned my ID badge in at the office, when I rode the elevator up to the 8th floor, when I was sitting at my desk typing memos and talking points, when we were in meetings talking about best practices, and when my boss would email me on my BlackBerry every night at 10 p.m. The pain was so bad it actually turned into shingles on my side. Shingles is a nerve disease related to stress, common among people over the age of 70, not 20-somethings. And I knew I needed to make a change. And during this period, I was spending a lot of time on Facebook, overdosing on FOMO, fear of missing out, worrying about what my friends were doing. So there was my friend that was off to get his MBA, his business degree, and I was like, maybe I should get my MBA. There was a friend that was going to work at a charter school, and I was like, maybe I should become a teacher. There was a friend who was starting her own food truck, and I was like, maybe I should start a food truck, even though I'm a really bad cook and an awful driver. And there was a buddy of mine who had already graduated from one of the top law schools in America, got a job at a top corporate firm, was making well over 6 figures, living in New York City, and there he was traveling with his girlfriend in Peru. And there he was on Instagram proposing at sunset in front of Machu Picchu. And I'm like, man, this guy's got it all figured out. He's got this amazing job. He's making all this money. He's got a sweet apartment. He's getting married. Like, I hate my job. I hate my life. I can't get a date on OkCupid. My life is ruined. Like, I'm never going to make it. And the truth is that it was only when I met other young people going through the exact same thing I was that I was able to have my breakthrough and find meaningful work. So today I want to tell you a few lessons I learned on my journey that can help anyone that's stuck and can help all of you empower millennials in the workplace. So the first lesson I learned, find believers. Surround yourself with people that believe in the beauty of their dreams. Because when I was back in DC, I used to come home to my roommate, Dan. And I'd say, Dan, I don't like my job. I don't want to do this anymore. I want to leave Washington, D.C., move to California. I've always wanted to live in California. I want to write a book. I want to support social entrepreneurs and young people going after their dreams. And he kind of looked at me, rolled his eyes, took a swig of beer, and said, Smiley, suck it up. Everyone hates their job. It's part of life. And I was like, man, suck it up. Like, I was 28 at the time, which is old, but not that old, right? I really didn't want to spend the next 30 years of my life depressed. But the truth is, the majority of the world thinks like Dan, right? The majority of the world, 70% of Americans are disengaged at their jobs. The majority of the people say, all right, suck it up. It's a paycheck. It's just work. So then I met believers. Then I went to a program called Starting Block, the Starting Block Institute for Social Innovation, which brings together young people that are interested in social entrepreneurship and using business for good. And at Starting Block, I met believers. I met people like Debbie. Debbie was starting Goldie Blocks, which is a toy company that teaches young girls engineering skills. I met people like Ted. Ted was starting MoneyThink, which is a nonprofit that teaches financial literacy and entrepreneurship to urban youth. I met people like Tom. Tom was starting Rising Tide Car Wash, which is a small business that employs people with autism. So I met people like Debbie and Ted and Tom, and they were like, wait a second, Smiley. You want to move across the country, you want to move to California, you want to write a book, you want to start supporting social entrepreneurs, you have to do that. If you don't do that, no one's going to do it. Because a crazy thing happens when you find believers, you find accountability, right? Normally you tell someone you're going to quit your job, and they're like, yeah, dude, you said that like 6 months ago. You're never going to do it. I'll see you for drinks on Friday, right? You tell someone you're going to start an app, and they're like, everyone's building an app, whatever, you won't do it. Tell someone you're going to write a book, and they're like, yeah, everyone's writing a book. Not when you tell believers. Because I told my friend Evan at Starting Block that I was going to quit my job, and he asked me one simple question: when? When are you going to have the talk with your boss? And he texted me every single week after that program, have you had the talk with your boss yet? Have you had the talk with your boss yet? Have you had the talk with your boss yet? I'd be in meetings with senior government officials at the White House getting calls from Evan, have you had the talk with your boss yet? I was like, you got to stop calling me, like the Secret Service is going to come after me. But you know what? The only reason I did end up having that talk with my boss, the only reason I did end up quitting my job, moving 3,000 miles without a plan to San Francisco, the only reason I did write a book, and the only reason I'm standing right here, right now in Stockholm, is because people like Evan held me accountable. Because when you find believers, you find accountability. Now, people like Debbie and Ted and Tom, they weren't talking about making lots of money. They weren't talking about rising up the corporate ladder. They weren't talking about getting featured in Fast Company or the New York Times or a publication. No, they were talking about how they could use their skills, their access, their privilege to empower those less fortunate. They were talking about how they can make the world more innovative, more compassionate, more sustainable. Right? So everyone calls millennials the entitled generation, the me generation. I think it couldn't be further from the truth. The truth is that 50% of millennials would take a pay cut to find work that matches their values. They turn down money to find work they care about. 90% of millennials want to use their skills for good. So despite unprecedented levels of unemployment, student debt, the jobs crisis, this is a generation that wants to work with purpose. So then the question becomes, okay, great, what does that look like? How do you do that? The next lesson I learned is that you have to pursue what's meaningful to you. Not your parents, not your boss, not your boyfriend, not your girlfriend, not your partner, not your friends on Facebook, but to you. You have to pursue what's meaningful to you. Because I went back and I interviewed my friend, the corporate lawyer. And I was like, man, you got it all figured out. You're making all this money. You got a sweet apartment in New York City. You're married. Like, what's your secret? What am I doing wrong? And you know what he told me? He told me that after 3 years of law school, this amazing job at a corporate firm, making all this money, that he was miserable in his job as a corporate lawyer, and that he was going to go back to graduate school at the age of 30 to become a high school social studies teacher, a high school history teacher, which is great for him, but what's the lesson there? The grass is always greener. We think everyone else has it figured out, but we spend time worrying about others when we should be worried about what we want. Why are you here? What is meaningful to you? And so I read a book called Man's Search for Meaning. Has anyone read that book? An amazing book, one of the best books ever written by Viktor Frankl. Who is Viktor Frankl? Viktor Frankl is a psychiatrist who survived the Nazi Holocaust. And he was in a concentration camp during which His entire family was killed, including his wife, who was pregnant. And he was interviewing people about what allowed them to go on in the face of almost certain death, right? You were either going to die next week or in 2 weeks, in a month, everyone was going to die. And he interviewed people about what allowed them to go on in the face of certain death. What allowed someone to wake up the next day. And he writes that being human always points and is directed to something or someone other than oneself, be it a meaning to fulfill or another human being to encounter. The more one forgets himself by giving himself to a cause to serve or another person to love, the more human he is. So that meaning comes not from what society has told us, wealth, status, success, but from giving it away. From love, from compassion, from service. Now, this doesn't mean we're all going to go work in the developing world in a small village somewhere, but I think it does mean that we have to approach our work and our organization from a point of service and sharing what we have to others. And the framework that I use in the book, and this is less a definition, because you can't define something like meaning, right? It's like happiness or fulfillment. Very mercurial concepts. There's not one definition for something like meaning, right? But meaningful work reflects who you are and what your interests are, allows you to share your gifts to help others, provides a community of believers that will support your dreams, and is financially viable given your desired lifestyle. And that last piece is really important, especially for millennials, financially viable, right? We're talking about meaningful work here, not how to take a meaningful vacation. This has to pay you. But the difference is that meaning is different for everyone. And for those of you that are more visual learners, this is about alignment. How can you align your unique gifts with the impact you want to have in a way that supports your desired quality of life? Now, if all of us were to fill out this diagram, tonight, this weekend, next week, we'd all have different Venn diagrams. Every single person in this room would have something different because we're all different. Now, Debbie, she started Goldie Blocks because of the discrimination that she faced as one of the only female engineering students at Stanford University. Ted started MoneyThink because when he was growing up in Chicago, he realized he had a lot of opportunities due to his privilege that his peers simply didn't have. Tom started Rising Tide Car Wash in South Florida because he saw how difficult it was for his own brother to get a job because his own brother has autism. So they had a personal connection to their work because meaning is personal. And shifting gears a little, how can we support millennials that are looking for these things in the workplace? So a recent Deloitte Millennial Survey, this is from 2016, 8,000 millennials in 30 countries, so this is not just in the US, found that millennials are looking for 4 main things. A sense of meaning in the workplace, coaching and mentoring from their supervisors, so their supervisor is not just a boss that you check in with or does your annual report or your performance review. Your boss is your mentor. You're at the place to learn. Learning, leadership development, so that you are important. People that are companies that design roles for their talent's future, my friend likes to say, not for theirs. Not for the company's future, but for the talent's future, right? And offer flexible work, remote work, work-life balance. So this idea that work is not everything, that people need time to exercise, to do yoga, to meditate, to live beyond their workplace. Millennial engagement, this is from an amazing book called When Millennials Take Over, comes in 4 main areas. Millennial engagement is digital. Obviously, everyone in this room knows that. It is clear. That means it's transparent. People know what's happening when decisions are made and why they're made. It is fluid. That means decisions are not just made from a hierarchy, but they're more inclusive, whether that's a holacracy or inclusive model, where everyone gets a seat at the table or everyone gets a voice. Even someone that just started. Maybe they don't have the final say, but their voice is still heard. And it's fast. So things don't take, like in the federal government, at least the United States, 5–10 years for a decision to get made. Employee engagement. 4 key areas that have been listed by one of the leading employee engagement consulting firms. Employees are looking for purpose, value. This is the idea that you are valued by your supervisor, that your supervisor knows who you are, that they care about you, that they care about your goals beyond just their supervisor's goals or the company's goals. What's going on in your life, what you want to do after you leave the company, who you are as a whole human being. Renewal. So there's a statistic here that employees who take a break every 90 minutes report a 30% higher level of focus. That is to say, if you leave your desk and go look up in the sun, you will be more engaged, and your company will be more productive. Isn't that interesting? If you don't work, you will be more productive. and this idea of focus. So focusing on one task at a time, which is very, very difficult for millennials, because obviously we're a generation that we're on Tinder, we're on Instagram, we're doing work, we're talking to our friend, we're drinking a cup of coffee all at the same time. But employees that are able to focus on one task at a time at work are 50% more engaged. So how can you give millennial employees that you have the ability to just do one project at a time, or one project for a period of 2 hours? So a lot of people like to call the millennial generation job hoppers, right? So the average millennial is currently staying in their job just under 3 years, which isn't that long. But the average person of any generation, whether that's Gen X, baby boomers, millennials, are staying in their job just about 5 years. So in a way, we're all job hoppers. Due to rapid changes in the global economy, rapid changes in technology, the jobs that were around 5 years ago are no longer around, right? Social media started about 10 years ago, and when I was in college, Facebook was just getting going when I was a senior in college, which was 10 years ago. Think about all the jobs that exist right now, today, due to social media that weren't around 10 years ago. So the United States Department of Labor has noted that 65% of today's elementary school kids will end up in jobs that haven't been invented yet. They'll end up in jobs that we don't even know what that job is. If we were to look at it as that position description, we're like, I don't know what that is. Right? Which is really incredible. And I think it means that we need a new model for how we're teaching young people to do their career development. Because in 10 years, millennials will make up 75% of the workforce. They currently make up about 50%. So if these jobs aren't going to be invented, we need a new model that encourages creativity, experimentation, flexibility, adaptability. The old model of a single career ladder that you get on at college, you pick a major, and you stay on it for the rest of your life, and maybe you pick a company and you're there for 20, 30 years, it doesn't exist. It's no longer practical. It's no longer relevant. So in the book, I talk about another model inspired by a friend, all about the lily pad career mindset. So instead of thinking about our careers as a model that goes one direction straight up, and what happens if you want to go work for a nonprofit for a little while? You got to get off the ladder. What happens if you want to write a book? Sorry, moving from DC and international development to San Francisco and social entrepreneurship, where am I going? It's okay, because if you think about lily pads, there isn't just a forwards and backwards. You can move to the side, you can move up, you can go here, and all of these things are getting closer and closer to where the roots are pulling you, what's meaningful to you. And I don't think this means you should quit your job every 6 months. That's not good for you, that's not good for a company, it's not good for anyone. But it does mean we need to be more flexible, and we need to have more experimentation in terms of how we treat our careers and how organizations treat their employees, especially young talent. So my message to the millennials in the room is, what will you learn? How will you treat your career like a learning experiment? How will you add value? And how can you invent your own path? And a great quote from one of my favorite mentors, Tom Chi, who is one of the leading folks formerly at Google X and one of the godfathers of rapid prototyping, who says, maximize the rate of learning while minimizing the rate of time to try ideas. And he's talking here about product development, right? How can you test rapidly? Instead of building the whole app, let's just use a piece of paper. How can we do that with careers? How can we try things in a month or 3 months or 6 months that normally we have given 5 or 10 years for? And just a quick example of someone who's done this, Amira Pollock, who is, used to be the global youth lead at SAP, one of the largest tech companies in the world. She started as a social entrepreneur, helping distribute rural lanterns to a small village in the Philippines, but went to SAP to build up her business acumen and gain business skills. And she was able to kind of build this new career path because there aren't that many people doing youth development work at a global tech company with 65,000 employees in 140 countries like SAP. So she was able to do what she loved because what she loved was very unique in a place like SAP. So for those of you that are millennials in the room, how can you work at a large company, a small company, and make yourself valuable by sharing what you love, especially if what you love is unique? And the two greatest opportunities for companies to empower millennial talent, give them an opportunity to make a social impact. So their work matters beyond their pay grade, their salary line, the name of the company that they work for. The work is making the world a better place, and provide skills and training. And note the fact that the majority of millennials think the business world is getting it wrong. 75% of millennials say businesses are focused too much on their own agenda rather than improving society. 28% of millennials say their organization is not making full use of their skills. So let's empower millennials. Give them an opportunity to find purpose in the workplace. Align their role with the company's mission. Exactly what they're doing there is not only related to the company's mission, but they know exactly their purpose there as well. How their specific position relates to their own goals and their company's mission. Give them an opportunity for value. Mentorship, skills exchange, co-leadership. What do I mean by co-leadership? This idea that a millennial, someone who's just come in the door, can lead a project, co-lead a project with someone that has 10, 15, 20 years more experience. Because that person with more experience probably has something to learn from someone who's young, that's really savvy with social media and tech, and the young person clearly has something to learn from someone that's been in a company for 20, 25 years. So how can we give those opportunities for co-leadership for millennials and people that have more experience to lead projects together? Autonomy. Encourage career exploration, flexible remote work. Currently, 34% of the workforce is freelance. This is a United States statistic. That's over 50 million Americans, and this number is only expected to rise, the rise of the freelance and the contractor economy. So how can we encourage that? Which also gives people an opportunity to see if they like working for a company, or to see how it is in terms of their career goals. Give employees, millennials, an opportunity to experiment. This idea that, yeah, someone's going to be there for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, maybe 6 or 7, and then they're going to leave. Oh my God, they're going to leave? Yes, they're going to leave. And that's okay. And instead of trying to make them stay for 10 or 15 years, which is completely unrealistic, maybe we don't want them to. Maybe someone comes in for 2 to 3 years, they do an amazing job, and an HR department actually helps them go on to what's next. Right? The HR department actually allows you to find your next job. Because then what are you going to do? You're probably going to recommend your friend to work for that company. You're going to still buy the product. You're going to talk great about it. And they've helped you in your career path. The company doesn't own you. No one wants to work somewhere for 20 years. And even if they did, they'd probably by year 7 or 8 kind of start to be not that great at their job. And obviously, there's still going to be people that stay in their jobs a long time. This doesn't apply to everyone, but I think this is a more inclusive model for most millennial talent. Engage. Give positive reinforcement and frequent feedback. The supervisor becomes the mentor. Create values-aligned culture design, team building, design thinking. Again, the workplace becomes more than just about work. It becomes an opportunity to completely train that employee. Explore. Offer apprenticeships. Unpaid sabbaticals for purpose-driven projects. That is to say, someone can go away for a couple weeks to go do something that they really want to do that's related to their personal goals, their purpose, their passions, and come back and their job's not gone. Include, offer inclusion systems over hierarchy. So just because someone has been there for 10 or 15 years, or their title has SVP next to it, doesn't mean they get to make all the decisions. Someone who's recent and new and hungry also has a seat at the table. Balance, this idea that work is not everything, right? Deliver employee perks tied to quality of life, renewal, creativity, play, focus, health, wellness, meditation, yoga. All of these things have been proven to increase productivity. Why are companies not all doing these during the day at the workplace? Community, again, millennials want exponential communities and dynamic networks. What do I mean by exponential communities? An exponential community is like the community I mentioned, Starting Block, right? When I went in, I was just here. I didn't like my job in Washington, D.C. I wanted to become a writer. I was moving to California. That was it. After 5 days, I had all these people connecting me. Oh, you should write for this blog. You should talk to this person. I'm going to connect you to my friend. I think they're starting this organization. Maybe you could work for them. I had an accountability buddy, Evan. I was like here in 5 days. It was exponential growth. So how can you create opportunities for your millennial employees both to have an exponential community within their organization and find those elsewhere? HR is the new life coach. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the TV show The Office. But in the TV show The Office, HR is the worst, right? Toby, it's like, oh, Toby from HR, right? And this is the traditional reputation for folks that work in HR. It's like, oh my God, I got to talk to HR. They're going to make me fill out some paperwork that's going to take 6 hours, right? No longer. HR is where it's at. HR is the place to be. HR is the new life coach, right? Before, HR was all about systems and paperwork. Now HR is going to be about knowing Each and every employee, why they're there, what they did before, what they want to do next, what their passions are, what their purpose is, how this role connects to their greater social mission, and we're going to help each employee do that. So the companies that figure it out and build those HR systems are going to get all the best talent. They're going to attract and retain the top talent. So how can you be a brand with a mission? How can you design products that are more than products? How can you build companies that's not just a company that's selling something that people buy on a website, but is actually something that's fostering growth in the world, that's making the world a better place, that's moving the needle on the world, that is a place that someone says, yeah, I want to work there, or I want to buy that product, because they're standing for something greater, because that is what this generation is looking for, right? Airbnb is not just a hotel or a place that you go stay, it's a place that builds community, right? I didn't know anyone in Stockholm 3 days ago. I stayed in an Airbnb with hosts, and they took me out, and I got to meet their friends, and I suddenly feel connected to Stockholm and Sweden in a way that was never was never possible before, right? I'm gladly going to give them my money rather than a Marriott hotel because I just gained community, right? That's what they're really selling is community, right? It's not a place to sleep, it's community. So I want to end with a story. This is about making the ask. So I live in San Francisco, and I bike everywhere. I don't have a car because I'm a hipster, and fuck fossil fuels. So I was biking home one night, and biking home in the Mission, and just kind of minding my own business. And this guy comes alongside me, and he's like, hey, my name is Bernat. How's it going? And I was like, I don't know who you are. Like, leave me alone. Like, I'm going to bike away. He keeps biking alongside me. He's like, my name is Bernat. I'm from Spain. I was like, I don't know who you are. Leave me alone. Keeps biking alongside me, says, hey man, my name's Bernat. I just moved here from Barcelona. I'm looking for a job. I'm a UX, UI designer. There's no jobs in Spain, really brutal unemployment. If I can't get a job here, I have to go back. If I don't get a visa, I have to go back. And I was like, oh, that's interesting, Barcelona. You know, my friend's living there. It's a beautiful city, one of the most beautiful cities in the world. I just visited, it's gorgeous. And he was like, yeah, it's great. What are you working on now? Oh, well, I'm working on this book. He's like, oh, well, do you have a cover designer yet? And I said, no. And he's like, well, check out my website. Go home, check out my website, and maybe we can work together. So I go home and I check out Bernat's website. I'm like, man, this guy's a really kick-ass UX, UI designer. He's really good. So I post on Facebook, like, hey, just met this crazy weirdo Bernat biking home in San Francisco. He's looking for a job as a lead designer at a startup in the Bay Area. If you know of anything, let him know. About 5 minutes later, my buddy Yi comments, and he's like, oh, Bernat should check out my friend's startup in Palo Alto. You should talk to Mark. I think it's just 4 of them. They don't really know what they're doing, but I know they're looking for a lead designer. So Bernat meets with the team about a week later. They hit it off. He gets hired as the lead designer. He gets a visa to stay in the United States. He ends up designing the cover for my book. And then I don't hear from him for like 9 months. 8, 9 months go by, I don't hear from him. And then all of a sudden, I get a text message from Bernat. He's like, I'm taking you out to dinner anywhere you want to go. I was like, sweet, like, that's great. I'm a writer, like, let's go to the fanciest place. Like, get a bottle of wine and a whole nice meal, and we're sitting there, and I'm like, you don't have to take me out to dinner, we can split the check. Turns out, the mobile startup he had been working for had just been acquired by Yahoo for $80 million. Right? And Bernat had equity in the company. It was only 5 of them. He had equity in the company. So he definitely could take me out to dinner. And he was like, thank you, Smiley, thank you. And I was like, no, thank you. Right? Because Bernat made the ask. He talked to a random stranger in a city he wasn't from, in a country he didn't live in, on a bicycle. Right? He put himself out there. So how can you put yourself out there and find meaningful work? How can you, as a company, give your millennial employees and all of your employees an opportunity to make the ask? So in closing, we are not the me generation. We are the purpose generation, and we will be engaged with our work because we have to. The challenges facing our generation are simply too serious to ignore. They're too serious to only worry about after 5 p.m. or on Friday night or Sunday morning. We can't climb the career ladder to nowhere because the stakes are too high. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Adam. Great presentation. I was thinking all those nice things you talked about, we all want that, don't we? Millennials or not. I was just curious, do you think we all can find meaningful jobs?
Yes, first of all, I think all work can be meaningful. And it's a matter of people aligning it personally, right? So a lot of people see this and say, oh, well, this doesn't apply to someone who, say, makes pizza for a living. How does that person? It's like, well, actually, I think it does. Actually, I think someone who makes pizza for a living probably finds their craft very meaningful because they know it's helping people. They see the impact every day. So I think it's all about people taking this and coming up with a very individual perspective. So yes, I think this applies to all generations. Obviously, I'm a millennial speaking to millennials. I don't think it's very fair for me to tell someone who's 50 or 60 or 70 what to do with their lives because I haven't had that life experience. But I think that everyone wants meaning in the workplace. A lot of the research shows it's not just millennials that want this. This just happens to be the largest demographic right now, and it's a lot of buzz. But everyone wants to feel purposeful at work, right? Everyone wants to feel valued by their supervisor.
I think that's very true. Thank you so much, Adam.
Thank you.
Thank you.